Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway, a nostalgic look back at our favorite Rangers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. I'm Tom Browning.
With my co-hosts, Rob Berger and Mike Browning.
We can be heard on Google Play, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and of course, our website at gotommyboyproductions.libsyn.com. That's gotommyboyproductions.libsyn.com. Please check it out. You can capture all of our episodes on our webpage. You can contact us by just clicking on the contact bar. You can leave a message. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear about the players that you would like for us to profile. Love to hear about maybe some of the seasons other than the 60s, 70s, and 80s that really made an impact on you as a fan. Again, we will be going off the menu every once in a while. We'll be talking about the current day New York Rangers, the state of the franchise, previous playoff games, impactful trades that took place in New York Rangers history. So wherever you listen to us, please hit subscribe. It's free. So without further ado,
here are your hosts, Tom Browning, Mike Browning, and Rob Berger.
Thanks for tuning in and welcome to another episode of the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway. I'm Tom Browning along with Rob Berger and Mike Browning. Guys, it's been a long time since we've had a show. June, I guess, early June was our last show, and at that time we were talking playoffs, and a lot has happened since then. So I think what we'd like to do today is to discuss some of the goings-ons with the Rangers during the offseason, and there's been a chock-full amount of stuff that has gone on with the organization. There's been a lot of stuff going on around the league. But I'd like to start off the show to just delve into the passing of Rod Gilbert. For the folks who have listened to the show before, we had Jean Ratelle, I believe it was the second show that I did. Rob, I think this was before you came on as my partner. At the time, I had mentioned that Jean Ratelle was the greatest homegrown New York Ranger to ever play for the club. And that was a tough decision for me to make that statement because you had Brad Park and you had Brian Leetch and you had Rod Gilbert. And I was going back and forth, what was it Park is the greatest because he finished second to Bobby Orr and to Potvin, I think 4 or 5 times for the Norris Trophy. And, you had as the league's best defenseman, and he was a dominant player. And then you had, of course, Brian Leetch, who won a Stanley Cup with the Rangers and was one of the top offensive defensemen in the National Hockey League. And then, of course, you had Rod Gilbert, who was one of the greatest right-wingers in the game, in the history of the game. And to this day, he still holds Ranger records for points and for goals scored. I'm looking back at it, and I would say today that Rod Gilbert was the greatest homegrown player who played his entire career with the New York Rangers. I think there's no doubt about that. Since Ratelle finished his career with the Bruins, Park finished his career with the Bruins and Red Wings. Leetch, of course, went on and played for Toronto. So I think right now, I would say without a doubt, he stood the test of time, Gilbert did, in a league where there was only six teams in the league back then. I mean, you were the best of the best of the best in order to play in the National Hockey League. You didn't have expansion. You had the very best players in the world playing at that time in the National Hockey League. And he was a key player for the Rangers. He was their Boom Boom Geoffrion. He was their Rocket Richard. As Emil Francis would say, he was our Wayne Gretzky. He was our Rocket Richard. He was the one that made fans come to the Garden to sell out every night. He contributed more than anybody as being the player that made the Rangers the hottest ticket in New York. The marquee great looks, the speed, the incredible slap shot that he had, patented after, of course, Boom Boom Geoffrion, his boyhood idol from Montreal. And he played on some of the best teams in the history of the National Hockey League, especially some of the best teams that never won a Stanley Cup, but that were right there year in and year out. But what was your feeling, Rob? I want to hand it off to you about your thoughts about Rod Gilbert, the player that he was, and maybe how the Rangers handled it. I know we talked before the show started. You have a little bit of a different take than I do on it. What were your thoughts on the passing of Gilbert and his importance to the Rangers organization?
Yeah, I think the Wayne, Emil Francis calling him the Wayne Gretzky is such a great analogy, maybe not so much from obviously no one's Wayne Gretzky, but I think it's hard for Ranger fans and you could probably say Yankees fans alike to think of a time when buildings here were empty and their teams weren't great. And Raj Gilbert was just a huge piece of turning those Ranger teams around. I mean, he came into a team that was 5th or 6th. I mean, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, for I think 6 seasons, possibly before that, maybe even more than that, 5 or 6 seasons, and then he comes in and just we've said it before, those damn Boston Bruins, but just changed that, just changed the culture of the New York Rangers, which is something I know you've talked a lot about, making the Garden a hot seat, changing the way that team plays, and looking. But it was such a pleasure just spending the past, when we decided to do this, spending the last couple of weeks or so just diving into Raj Gilbert, and thank goodness for YouTube, because as I've talked about in the show before, it stinks to look back at all the guys I didn't get to see live. And the fact that, once hockey season rolls around, or even over the summer, we get such little exposure. I'll never understand why MSG isn't. I know we lost a lot of the tapes, but do more retrospectives on guys like Gilbert. Yep. His numbers are astounding, and especially considering he continued it after the famous goal game line broke up.
That's right.
In fact, one of his best years was the first year without Hadfield, right? And you wonder, one of the things I dislike most about hockey fans in a way is, how many cups do they win, when did they win them, and so on. And I wonder if Gilbert's legacy is different. I don't wonder. I know if the Rangers win in 72, Raj Gilbert, and just totally, his view, not just amongst Ranger fans, but among hockey fans, is totally different.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no doubt about that. But it wasn't just 72. It was so many other years where, injuries, and the Flyers in 75 where, that whole group would be perceived differently. Right, Rob? If they had won at least one cup, they were always a heartbreak kids. They always had something crazy go against them, and without a doubt. But he was one guy that I think more than the rest, because of the way he played, just the grit that he had, the toughness, the charisma he had. He was the heartbeat of that team. He really was. He was the heartbeat. He was a guy that, because he wasn't very big, as you Mike, as you know, and Robert, as you know, but he would take on Dave Schultz. He would take on the big bad Bruins. He never backed down. In a lot of ways, I thought he was they always say how Vic Hadfield was the muscle of that line, but I tell you, Raj Gilbert was tough. He drove to the net. He played great in the trenches. He was just very strong. He was a strong guy, and he never backed down. He was never intimidated. And he just wasn't big enough. He just wasn't big enough to take on the big guys if they made it a point to really go after him and pound him, which they did. But he never backed down. He would never give in. And I think the Ranger fans really loved that about him. And, that's why he's Mr. Ranger. He stayed in Manhattan. He stayed connected to New York. And he would mentor all the Ranger draft picks. He would mentor all the current day Rangers. He would take them under their wing. He would take them out to dinner, whether it be the teams from the John Tortorella years or, the teams from the 2000s. He was there for all of the kids, and he taught them what it was like to be a pro in the National Hockey League. And I think that's what really separated him, I think, from the Brad Parks and the Jean Rattelles. No fault of theirs that they were traded, but I think that's the thing that made him Mr. New York, and he was the Mickey Mantle of the New York Rangers. There's no doubt about that.
For me, that's how for so many younger fans got to know Raj Gilbert, and what he's done in the community, or what he did in the community, will never be forgotten. So many, and I believe he created this legacy, this expectation that great Rangers contribute to things like that. Mm-hmm. Guys like Graves, guys like Lundqvist with the Garden of Dreams. Even as he was up in his 70s, he was still a mainstay at Garden of Dreams events.
Yeah.
He won the Lester Patrick Award for American hockey.
Yep.
My favorite tidbit that I read about Gilbert was that David Dinkins officiated his wedding. I did not know that.
Yes, I saw that.
But that tells you about being in New York, especially for, when he came into the league, there was a language barrier for him. He wasn't a perfectly fluent English speaker. I mean, he eventually became, right? But to come from Montreal, and then, like you said, be such a New Yorker is just spectacular.
Yeah, he had that very thick French accent.
Yeah.
It wasn't until he was signed by the Rangers sponsor team in Guelph that he learned English. As a matter of fact, the Rangers, they sponsored that team up in the Ontario Hockey League up in Guelph, and that's where he won the cup up there, the Juniors Cup, and he stayed in a boarding house, and as most of the Rangers who played for that team did, and he learned from the folks who owned the home how to speak English. So that was his. He only had learned about a year before because he 62 was his first year with the Rangers, and that's so he always had that broken English, but that was part of his charm and everything else. You're right, Rob. He was so important. Right up to the end, really. I mean, even last year, I remember seeing him at all the big events, right? And Jean Ratelle night and some of the other stuff that they honoring people. And Mike, what are your thoughts about Gilbert?
Yeah, so as a younger fan, as Rob was saying, there's just not really a whole lot that we know about him. Which is unfortunate because it's almost like for my generation, it's like the Rangers' history began in 1994 because before that, they were just such a tragically flawed team, and it was nothing but heartbreak or just total disappointment or maybe even irrelevance. And then 1994 was kind of like it just kicked off a whole new era, and like you were saying as well, the tape really doesn't exist from games before then, and as Rob was saying, the Rangers just don't do a whole lot of retrospective content on their old players. So, you take a little bit of a closer look at them and you realize like just how special this player was. And you almost feel a little bit cheated that the Rangers really never had a guy like this in the last several decades, a homegrown, just superstar forward. I mean, we've had guys, we've had Jágr and we've had Messier, but they weren't homegrown guys. They weren't with the team for as long as he was. And they weren't, even the Messiers and Gretzkys and Jágrs of the world weren't putting up the points as consistently, for such a long period consistently as he was. And then you add to the fact that he was so charismatic and so beloved by the city and loved the city back. We really haven't had a guy like that, A, as talented, B, as charismatic. It's kind of a shame. And, the only guy that we really had like this, played his entire career on one team, was charismatic, was loved by the city, loved the city back, was Henrik Lundqvist. But obviously as a goalie, it's just a little bit different. He's behind the mask the whole game, and
Right.
He's not out there mixing it up with the other team, and not on one of the most top lines the Rangers have ever had. So it's a little almost disappointing that we haven't had a guy like that, and that we didn't really know too much about him because of just the lack of awareness. But then I was going to say, we're kind of at a point where maybe we're almost going to have a new Gilbert in kind of this young crop of guys that we have. Maybe Lafreniere is the new Gilbert, a homegrown guy that is probably more talented than any draft pick we've ever had. And it's almost like a reincarnation. So we'll see.
Maybe. I mean, you're right, Mike. You hit it on the head. It's a shame that there's such a void there that, one, maybe two generations of Ranger fans really don't know much about Gilbert, except you see this guy at all the big events, welcoming fans, speaking on behalf of some of his former players. But, you look at the Bruin fans. I mean, every Bruin fan knows about Esposito and Bobby Orr and Johnny Busick and Dallas Smith and Jerry Cheevers, or the Montreal Canadiens know Rocket Richard, Henri Richard, Jean Beliveau, all those great players, Ken Dryden, and even the Flyer fans, with Bobby Clark and Schultze and Reggie Leach and all those guys. The Ranger, it just boggles my mind that a major market team, an original six team, does not do anything like that to educate the fans and just keep the name and the video out in front and center. I mean, it's just there's more. I think there's more tape of Babe Ruth than there is of Rod Gilbert. And Babe Ruth played in the 20s and 30s. I mean, it's just crazy to me, and it's a shame. It really is, and I think that may have contributed to what I thought. And I think, Rob, you disagree. Again, maybe the move to North Carolina has something to do with that, but I just didn't get a sense that there was a lot of fanfare. That's the wrong term. It's kind of crude, but he did pass away, but there, a lot of just exposure or stuff that came out in support of Gilbert's career, just keeping him, front and center during this time. But you're saying that Boomer did stuff on the Fan. You said MSG did do some stuff, so maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, they did. And it's I think it's all relative. I think he got a good amount of coverage, considering it was Hockey Talk in August in New York. By August, first of all, by August, the primary talk here is Giants and Jets on sports radio, even more than the Yankees and Mets.
Right.
But you're right though. I mean, I think part of the problem too is just the Rangers organization. I mean, if you walk into Madison Square Garden, it's a bland arena when you're walking the concourses.
Yep.
Very little. You go to Montreal, you can't even get in the building without running across 8 statues and history everywhere.
Yeah.
Yankee Stadium has history everywhere in that building.
Yep.
Dodger Stadium, a lot of these big places, and the Rangers don't do that. They have a few things high up, but nothing is in your face when you walk into
exactly. It's a venue. It's an entertainment venue. It's not the Rangers' home arena. It's an entertainment venue that the Rangers played their home games at. That's the difference.
Yeah. I mean, even Staples Center in LA, which is similar, still has a Gretzky and Robitaille statue outside.
Mm-hmm.
And on one of the main concourses, it's a huge tribute to the Triple Crown line. You don't have any of that at the Garden. And
right.
Besides the retired jerseys, and there's a tribute to 94 somewhere, but there's so many great Rangers. I mean, you want to see kids see posters of guys like Harry Howell and someone like Ron Greschner, who's still top 4 in games played for the Rangers.
Yeah.
And there is none of that.
No.
And so I hear what you're saying, and because I would like to see more too, more tributes for Gilbert. I think it was equivalent to the coverage the Rangers get in this market. I can tell you, I think it would be a lot different, at least on Long Island, if it was one of the core Islander guys from the 80s.
Oh, are you kidding?
Right? I mean,
Newsday would.
You will.
Oh my god.
Newsday would have a whole Newsday would have a whole issue on it
for 2 weeks. Yeah.
I mean, I love making fun of my Islander fans because I feel like every broadcast, every game you go to, it's like, we're going to do a tribute to April of 1982. And the 5-game winning. They recognize it all the time. And the Rangers don't. And, Mike, I think Mike makes a great point. Like, hopefully, as Ranger fans, this is the beginning of a new era. As I was, reading more about Gilbert, I really took a deep dive into the most games played for the Rangers. And other than Stahl and Girardi, there's nobody else in the top 20 that's really recent. I mean, Graves is up there, or excuse me, and obviously, Brian Leach, but the last few years, that's still not this century, right?
Right.
I mean, a few games a century, Graves a few games a century, Messier, but really, I mean, there haven't been any long-term Rangers. I mean, Kreider's next at 22nd, but it's still only 570 odd games. So that's what the Rangers need, and I guess we'll talk about that in a bit. I will say I did have the pleasure of meeting Rod Gilbert, and when I met him, it was after a Rangers-Kings game, and I was wearing the old-school purple and gold Kings jersey. And he, class act that he is, maybe it was because the Rangers won that night. He complimented my jersey.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, that's Rod Gilbert. It really is. He was such a gentleman personified. And I mean, here's a guy that played 19 years with the Rangers, had 11 years of scoring over, I think, at least 20 goals. He had, I think, 6 30-goal seasons, had a 40-goal season. In 76 playoff games, he had 34 goals and 68 points, almost a point a game in the playoffs. And back then, that meant a lot. Back then, so few teams were in the playoffs, and he played against guys that were bigger and stronger, and he was the heartbeat of that team. And he had Vic Hadfield, who was the power forward. He had Jean Ratelle, who was the playmaker, who also had a good shot, right? And then he had Gilbert, who fancied himself. His Boom Boom Jeffrey on the Canadiens was his idol, and he had that booming slap shot. He had quick release, and he could skate. and he was just tough as nails, and then, he played the whole career with them, and he came back from 2 back surgeries. I mean, just the back surgery issue, when he first broke into the league is a heartbreaking story, and then when the graft broke, he became paralyzed again. That time they thought they lost him. I don't know if you saw on YouTube, but Emil Francis is interviewed, and I guess Emil Francis was in the hospital room visiting him along with the president of the Rangers, William Jennings. I think Jennings was actually president of Madison Square Garden, I believe. And they just happened to be there when Gilbert had the graft. He had some issues, and he was in the hospital. All of a sudden, he choked out. He turned blue, and he had the whole team of nurses and doctors treating him, and he kept on hearing how Roger Bear is saying this, how he kept on hearing the nurses saying that we lost him, we don't have a pulse, we lost him, and he said he actually left his body, and he could look down and see Emil Francis jumping on top of trying to Emil Francis wasn't very big, and he's trying to look and trying to figure out, is everything going to be okay? And Emil Francis was so upset that he gets on top of the bed and he's looking over and he says, "Damn it, you better save him. He's my best player." And the way he says that is just a funny story, but it's true. And Roger Bear says, when Emil Francis said to the nurses and doctors, "Damn it, you better save him. He's my best player," he says, that's what gave me the will to fight even more and for me to come back and lick this thing. But it was just a fascinating story. And he's just meant so much to the league, so much to the team, so much to the league. He played in the Summit Series against the Russians. He played very well in 2 cups, 2 World Cups. He was a great playoff player. And to me, I think he's the best homegrown Ranger player, bar none, who ever played his entire career with the Rangers. And, he will be missed. And it's just, I hope they do something nice for him, for the family, when the season opens. And I think they're going to wear number 7 on their jersey this year. Any final thoughts on Gilbert, Rob, and Mike before we get into the goings-ons with the Rangers this summer?
No, I just hope to see something, a lot of good tributes this year, and hopefully, Sam and Joe in the booth, evoke some memories throughout the year as well. I think, as we talked about, it'll be really, beneficial to the younger generation of fans, and I think everyone would really appreciate it.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah, I agree with that. And listen, he's the answer to like 15% of those Rangers trivia questions they asked during the game anyways. So if not more, it's always
that's right.
This Rangers score. Once you hear goals, you're like, all right, it's Ron Gilbert.
Yep. Well, Bill Masterton Trophy in 1976, Lester Patrick Trophy in 91, NHL All-Star Game in 64, 65, 67, 69, 70, 72, 75, and 77. Inducted into the Hall of Fame the same summer as his buddy Jean Ratelle in 1982. First Ranger to ever have his number retired at Madison Square Garden, number 7. Just chock full of awards. And let me see. New York Rangers team record for career goals, 406. Team record for career points, 1,021. Team record for consecutive games, with an assist by a forward at 10. And he shares this record, shares the New York Rangers team record for assists in one game with a 5. He did that 3 separate times. So, yep, that was Roger Bear. All right, guys. So this summer, obviously, the Rangers have a new coach. Rob, what are your thoughts about the goings-ons for the team during the summer? What were some of the highlights, some of the lowlights, some of the things you're concerned about? We'll start with you.
Some of the highlights. I mean, I think the number one highlight for the Rangers is that it's another year. This is going to be an older team. A highlight for a big group of fans, I guess, is Ryan Reeves. And you will see, change the culture. I don't know. I know he'll be, hopefully he's a good locker room guy. I don't know if this team necessarily needed that. I mean, there's no way for us to ever know if a team needs that. A little confused about not being able to keep Buchnevich. I don't know how you guys feel about that. Everything I read, again, I don't know, was that so many guys in the locker room liked him and he had so many buddies on the team. But otherwise, I think I think this season it will be fair to talk about. I can't believe I'm going to say this out loud, but actually going to the playoffs, right? I don't think there really weren't they didn't make as many moves as I thought they would.
Really? Well, how about
I mean, they got Goudreau for a
Yeah.
7. Yeah, I mean,
And they got Nemeth.
he's not a. I mean, Goudreau's good. I mean, he's not going to ever play. He's not going to see any special teams minutes. He'll be in the third line. The Heedle's good. I'm most excited for Heedle this year. I know as of right now they've been playing this line of in the preseason. So actually, I'm not going to comment on the preseason because none of us should, because everything that's happening here is worthless. Excited Fox won the Norris because he so deserved it. Too bad the GM that brought him in wasn't around for it. But yeah, I thought they'd make more moves, more meaningful moves. I mean, their top 6 look the same, and their top 4 defensemen look the same. So nothing changed there.
Well, how about the coach? I'm surprised you guys haven't mentioned Gallant yet. Well, Mike, you haven't had a chance to talk, but how about, Gallant, to me, is the biggest move. Mike,
I think we talked about it in the last show.
Did
I
we?
think so. Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
regardless, it is a great move. There is a small part of my brain that's chirping at me, why was he dismissed so quickly in Florida and Vegas? But he's been successful everywhere. So, I mean, he could be what this team needs.
Yeah. Well, my bad for bringing that up. I guess
it's a good reminder. It's good as we're getting ready to start the season. It's a reminder that another coach of the New York Rangers. I mean, we do this every few years anyway. So
yeah, we do. That's true. You're right. You wonder when it's going to happen again. Maybe 2 or 3 years from now. Hopefully not. But he did fill out his coaching staff, I guess, over the summer with guys that he knows. And Drury's had a chance to make more of an impact, I guess, as a GM. Mike, what are your thoughts about the offseason moves?
Well, you can't say being a Rangers fan has been boring these last few years. I mean, the amount of changes happening with the roster, with the front office over the last few years, with big players retiring and other guys getting traded and other guys getting brought in, the amount of high draft picks that we've had, it's been unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, as far as the Buchnevich trade, I think that obviously that was the biggest move. The return, trading a bona fide top line young right winger who is well liked and fit that tough mold that I think Drury is kind of trying to implement on the team was a little puzzling.
Well, you don't like Sammy?
No, it's not that I don't like Blaise
Blaise,
but I just think that in a return, he's a 4th liner, and then a 2nd rounder in return for a bona fide, top line player who plays great defense, plays great offensively, and will mix it up and defend his teammates. I just don't think that it was a necessary move, especially with the lack of other moves on the roster. That wasn't a move that had to be made at that point. And, I think there's a lot of different players who bring to the table what Blaise does, and you don't necessarily need to trade for a guy like that. I think it was a little bit out of touch by Drury. I don't want to, be too critical of him yet because he hasn't been here very long, but I thought that move was a little bit of a head scratcher. I don't know if there was another move that was planned, but they couldn't pull the trigger because of maybe the Eichel situation, which is a mess in and of itself, by the way. So, maybe as Rob was saying that, that there weren't as many moves as he thought there would be. Maybe that's the reason why there's kind of a backlog of moves in the league because of the Eichel situation. But, it is what it is. I'm still excited about this roster. I think defensively, there's more talent than I've ever seen, at least on paper, from front to back. You have really high-end guys who bring both offense and defense to the table. Obviously, first and foremost, you have Adam Fox, who is in his early 20s and has already won in Norris. So, I mean, can't help but be excited about that. And then you pair him with Ryan Lindgren, who's been really good in his own right. They've got chemistry, which is something that really can't be said a lot about this team. A lot of different lines and a lot of different pairings because of how young they are and how much turnover there's been. And then you have K'Andre Miller with another year under his belt and another year playing with Trouba, who hopefully is a little bit better this year than he was last year. And then you have, obviously, Nils Lundkvist, who's one of the most exciting prospects in all of hockey, added to the mix. And then, obviously, you have Jones and Schneider, who are gunning for a spot too. So it's almost like, what are you going to do with all these guys, which is a good problem to have. So I'd say defensively is where I'm most excited about for this team and kind of what I'm keeping an eye on most in the preseason. Yeah,
and you have Nemeth and Tenured too, who are just arrived from from outside the organization. I was surprised. The thing I thought was the biggest surprise, just from a league standpoint, was Eichel. I mean, I'm surprised you guys didn't mention. Mike, you touched on it a little bit, but I think there was so much talk about the Rangers getting Eichel over the summer. He's not going anywhere, and I think his career could be in doubt right now.
Could end up in court, and he'd probably lose because of the collective bargaining agreement and how it's set up. But it's really it's a perfect example of how bad of a job the Pagulas have done with the Sabres, and these fans deserve so much better than what they've been given. It's embarrassing. I mean, the Sabres are lucky the Coyotes are around, because otherwise they'd be by far the worst team in hockey this year.
Well, that's all well and good, but I think and you're right about that, Rob. But I think it's a lost season for him. He's probably not going to play this year because obviously he's not well, right? He can't play. And I thought Drury showed restraint. I mean, he didn't give in. He's a young GM. He could have easily have buckled to the pressure and done something stupid and trying to make a move. I never thought that this guy was a difference maker anyway. I mean, it's like Ralph Kiner said.
You know how I feel.
Well, I know you feel differently.
I feel differently. I think he's one of the best hockey players I've seen live. He is an amazing hockey player. Well, he's the epitome of power forward. Well,
it reminds me of a story of what Ralph Kiner, the former Pirate great first baseman, was the home run king in the National League for God knows how many years in a row. And they would always wind up in last place, and he wanted to get a raise, and the GM told him, you know what? We finish in last place with you. We can finish in last place without you. And with Eichel, he's a great talent, but I don't think he's a difference maker. I just applaud Drury for not bringing him into the fold. I'd rather do this thing organically with some of the skilled players they have right now. But getting back to what you guys were saying, it wasn't the top 6 players on the Ranger forwards that contributed to just the debacle against Tom Wilson, the Capitals, and Matt Martin and Clutterbuck against the Islanders. It was the bottom 6. And that's why Drury did what he did. He needed guys that would stand up and make a difference in the locker room and on the ice. And you got a Gaudreau who won a Stanley Cup with Tampa Bay. And you had Sammy Blais who won a Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues. And so he brought guys in with winning pedigree who are very solid third and fourth line players who actually, by their own teammates' admission on those cup-winning teams, they were very important players. They tilted the scales against a very physical Bruins team when the Blues played the Bruins in the Stanley Cup. And obviously, we know about the Islanders and what they do with their identity line, and Tampa Bay with their line with Gaudreau. I mean, they can't speak highly enough about this guy. So I thought it was a good trade getting guys with character, guys who've won big games and big spots, who know their role. And I don't think the Rangers ever had guys who. I think that's what was lacking with this team. Whether it was Quinn's fault or the GM's fault, Gordon's fault, I don't think the guys on this team know what their role is, what their responsibilities. I think Gerard Gallant has already done a good job. He wants guys to play the game, everybody to play the game the right way. He all wants guys to play defense. He wants them all to back check. He wants them all to go to the net. And I think that's the difference. And I think that's why Buchnevich is no longer a Ranger, because you had to give up somebody good to get somebody good. And I applaud that move. And I think they're going to be a better, more physical team than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I don't understand how we could speak to knowing who knew their role and who didn't. But positive though, the Rangers have over $9 million in cap room, and they have 2 second-round picks this year. So if they need to do stuff at the deadline, they can. A lot of it's going to be how much production. Hopefully you're right, and the bottom 6 can create opportunities for the top 6, and get them goals. I still don't understand the Buchnevich move, because it's not like they didn't have room. I mean, you want Sammy Blais in? I guess he'll be a fit. He'll be on that 4th line, which will be a revolving door with guys like Rooney and Reeves.
Well, you hope not. No. See, that's what they're trying not to do. That was always a disposal line in the past. They wanted identity. Sorry, Mike. I'm sorry.
Where would you put Sammy Blais then? I mean, you keep Hedl with Gaudreau and Kravtsov, because they said Hedel's going to be the center of that line. I mean, Sammy Blais fits. I don't see anywhere else where he fits.
Well, no, I agree with you. No, but I thought I misunderstood what you said. You're saying that's what'd you say you called a?
Well, I mean, that's what's going to happen. I mean, Ryan Reeves isn't playing a full season. He's not an every game hockey guy. I mean, he just hasn't been that. And
well, I think Gallant thinks more highly of him than maybe his other coach. I think Gallant thinks he can play at least 75-80% of the games on the fourth line. I think the Rangers need an identity line where it's the same three guys that go out shift after shift on that fourth line, because before it was just a repository for extra guys that would rotate through that fourth line. That's what they're trying to get away from. And maybe have a fourth guy who's kind of the rover, if you will, on that fourth line when the Reeves can't play or something, or somebody gets hurt. But I think the feeling is Gallant seems to think that Reeves can play a full schedule.
Yeah, he has. He's played 70-plus games multiple times in his career. I mean, at this point in his career, I don't know if you want him to. But that's just my view. I mean, listen, I agree that, I think, especially for a lot of fans, if you were to ask them what's the one thing they wanted this offseason, and that would be toughness, right? More so than anything else. And the Rangers obviously did that.
Because they have the skill. They have plenty of skill. Is not something that they lack. It's that team toughness that listen, these kids have their head on a swivel because they don't have the Matt Martins, the Clutterbucks, and Cizikas. What happened against Tom Wilson and with Martin and Clutterbuck was a total disgrace. I mean, that was a throwback to the old days, and they had no one who could do a decent job for payback. And you need that. You still need that toughness, but you need guys who can play. And that's why you and I and Mike, we have this disagreement. You guys don't think the identity line can play hockey. These guys can play hockey. They can
play hockey. I think you're mischaracterizing at least what I'm saying. I think Mike's on the same page. It's not that they can't play hockey. It's that they're not going to be big producers for you. And
of course not.
But you kind of like.
But you look in the score sheet. I'm not talking about producing on the score sheet necessarily. I mean, they're producing in giving time and space to their teammates, and that's what they do. You can't touch these guys because you're going to have to pay the price when the fourth line comes out, and that's what I mean. There's so much that's not in the stat sheet, and yet these guys do contribute goals. They do contribute assists. I mean, we saw it last year against how many goals has that line scored against the Rangers in the last several years? It's unbelievable. How many goals Matt Martin, Clutterbuck, and Cizikas have scored against the Rangers and some of the other clubs in key spots is enormous. It's unreal.
I mean, I think their biggest asset is their defense.
Of course, sure.
And absolutely. I think that's what the Rangers need from that line, both from guys like Goudreau and Blais and Reeves and Rooney, is more so than anything else. Is that when the Crosby line comes out. Right, when the Giroux line comes out, Barzal, all these lines that they see a lot during the year, they can put them out there.
Exactly. Right.
I don't think the Rangers have had that for.
Totally.
They haven't had a shutdown line. It's not. It's more than just physical. It's that's the biggest. I think that's what unfortunately gets overlooked from the Martin line, is that they're Barry Trotz's go-to line.
They are
in key situations.
Yeah, no doubt.
For shutdown.
Yeah, we've seen them shut down the Crosby line in the playoffs. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have no problem bringing in guys like Blais and
Goudreau
and Martin and then whoever, the guys like that, and Reeves. But you don't trade a rare commodity for a much more plentiful commodity, and that's what the Rangers did when they traded Buchnevich. I mean, he is rare. A guy that plays a two-way first line winger who is relatively affordable. I think he was 26 years old. I mean, those guys are incredibly valuable assets in the league, and we traded him for a fourth liner, and we don't even know how he's going to fit into the Rangers system. He wasn't an everyday player for the Blues when they made their Stanley Cup run.
Well, that's because he was hurt. He took
a lot of bad penalties when he was in. Buchnevich was. He was great in all situations. He created a ton of offense. He was beloved by his teammates. I think that was a bad trade. I think any way you slice it, it's just an ill-advised trade, and it might have been, a reactionary move to what happened last year with the Islanders, like you said, and with the Capitals. But I think whatever. If you want to bring in Reeves, flip a couple draft picks for him. I think, if that's what's going to, help make some of the younger guys feel a little bit more at ease, having a guy like that on your team, I have no problem with that. I do believe the intangibles like that aren't nothing. I do believe that the, locker room chemistry is important, and, having a guy like that having your back out on the ice, it's not nothing. It does affect the outcome of the game slightly, but not even close to as much as your top six does. I mean, when you talk about the success, it's just such a weird and befuddling narrative in the NHL, and a lot of these guys talk about it all the time. And you look at these really successful teams, these cup-winning teams, and they talk about the fourth line like just inordinately, and it's just like they play the least amount. It just doesn't make any sense. It's counterintuitive to talk about the guys that play the least on a successful team as to why they're successful. I mean, you have these guys scoring 85, 90, 100 points on the first two lines, and you want to talk about the fourth line. I don't really understand. I think if you just look at it objectively, it makes sense to get as much of the rare commodity as you can, the skill, and then fill out the rest of the roster with the guys that might be good locker room guys or guys that can play great defense.
Well, that's what the Rangers are doing. That's what they've got all the skill right now. But what you said before, Mike, you can't understand it when they say they bring up teams bring up third and fourth line players who are tough. That has stood the test of time since I was a little kid. All the teams that won Stanley Cups, when you saw the post-game celebrations and interviews during the playoffs and whatnot, they always tout the time and space that their tougher teammates always gave them in the big games. And I'll tell you right now, every single season, ever since I was a kid, I'm telling you right now, that was hammered home to the fans about how those players made the biggest impact in the biggest games, especially in the playoffs, because they gave the star players all the time, all the room they needed to do what they do best, and that is score goals, make assists, make the plays. And I know you don't get it, you just can't understand it, but it's been that way since the beginning, since I started following the sport, and it still is the same way. You hear the Lightning players talk, and the Blues a couple of years ago, and the Bruins when they won, and I'm telling you, they keep on talking about those teammates as they are the difference makers, and that's why Drury pulled the trigger on those moves, because
I mean, I agree with you. You're right. You're not wrong, but it's the price. If you would have told me Pavel Buchnevich for Barclay Goodrow, that'd be totally different. Barclay Goodrow he's one of the top forwards in the playoffs in terms of minutes played. Like, he's not a bottom tier guy. I think there are plenty of guys out there like Sammy Blais. Maybe not plenty, but there are guys that you don't have to give up. Someone who they have plenty of room under the cap for.
We'll see. You have to give up somebody. They had to give up somebody. You're going to give up Kakko? You're going to give up Krasov? Who are you going to give up? You had to give up somebody. Lafreniere, who are you going to give up?
Honestly, you probably could have given up a fourth-round pick.
I don't think. No.
You gave up a set. Wait.
Yeah.
So a seventh-round pick for Barclay Goodrow, who played 17 minutes a game in the playoffs, versus one of your top-scoring wingers.
If you just look at the cost, if you look at if you white-labeled Buchnevich and you just looked at his stats and you looked at the minutes played, his advanced statistics, his possession numbers, his goals, his assists, his age, his contract. I mean, you're talking at least a first round pick, maybe two. Or you're looking at maybe like a first round pick and a top prospect, and then we get a second round pick and a fourth liner for him. I mean that's a loss anyway. I mean, if you're just talking about pure asset management, you're not talking about any specific player or any specific attribute of a player. If you're just talking about pure, on paper, that's pure bad asset management. The Buchnevich trade.
Yeah, Mike, you brought up before. There may have been something behind the scenes that Drury felt pressure,
maybe to
bring someone in. I mean,
sure.
Well, it could be. Blais did play well on the second and third line with St. Louis too. He wasn't relegated to the fourth line. He dealt with injuries. They feel this guy has a lot more upside to his game yet to be realized. So he has played on the second line. He has played on the third line. And he has battled injuries, unfortunately. And he's still a guy with a lot of locker room presence. The teammates love this guy. Actually loved him in St. Louis.
You don't trade realized value for potential value in any trade.
I'm not so sure, Mike.
Unless you have to.
Well, I'm not so sure that I get it. I'm not so sure the GMs on other teams rank Buchnevich as high as you guys do. I mean, he came into his own the last year and a half, no doubt. He was definitely ascending. He's an ascending player, no doubt about that. But I'm not so sure that he grades out in the minds of a lot of GMs around the league as a future Hall of Famer that the way you're making him out to be.
I don't think that.
I mean, let's call it the way it is. I mean, he's been with them now for several years. And again, they didn't make the playoffs with him when he was playing his best hockey.
You can't say that in hockey. You can't use that argument in hockey.
Why not?
Didn't make the playoffs because there's 25 guys playing.
Of course. But there's an element that the Rangers didn't have, Rob. I mean, you talk about value. I would argue that there's a lot more value for a Rangers team to get guys who are going to protect their teammates to fill out the bottom six than there is missing talent that you think might not be there. There's plenty of talent that's there. I mean, they've got guys that are just chomping at the bit. Morgan Barron and a few other guys who are just chomping at the bit to want to join the top 9 forwards. They've got plenty of talent. They've got plenty of young skill guys. And now the skill guy is going to finally, produce. Is Kravtsov going to produce? Is Kakko now his 3rd year? Is Hedl, been hearing about Hedl now for 4 years? Is he going to produce? I mean, maybe this is the element that will allow them to produce for the first time. Maybe these types of guys will give them the breathing room and the confidence to play a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger than ordinarily they would have. And to me, that was probably there's more value in getting these guys and losing a Buchnevich, who maybe is just another skilled forward that they have plenty of right now. We'll see. I think time will tell, obviously, right? When the season starts, we'll see just how well these guys do. I think it was sorely missed. I think it couldn't have been more evident than the end of the year, obviously. So what else? What other thoughts? Go ahead. I'm sorry. Please.
I was just going to say, I just don't like the argument that, you trade somebody because you already have a surplus of that. It's still value. I mean, you don't just because you have 2 cars doesn't mean you trade or sell one of them for less than it's worth just to get rid of it.
But if you need,
I don't like that.
Well, it depends. If you need someone who can drive that car, right, Mike? I mean, Rangers
just keep it. I mean, if it's
well, then how are you going to get better?
Valuable,
well, then how do you get better? How do you change the formula if you just keep on playing guys who are looking over their shoulder all the time?
If you really want Matt Martin, trade the Islanders a 2nd rounder. I'm sure they would give you him for it.
Well,
maybe a 2nd rounder.
Well, maybe Sammy Blais at 25 years old, who's 7 or 8 years younger than Matt Martin. Maybe he's the next Matt Martin for the New York Rangers. I mean, Mike, they didn't have this element before. They did not.
Well, then trade a 3rd rounder for Sammy Blais, or a 4th rounder maybe, or a 3rd and 4th rounder. Yeah, if you really have to.
Well, we don't know. We don't know the negotiations. We don't know what other teams are competing for this player. We don't know exactly what the negotiations entail. And there's a salary.
Let somebody else take them. Let somebody else overpay for them.
Well, how about
I think we all agree.
Somebody else.
From where I'm sitting, I'm fine with Sammy Blais being on the New York Rangers. Absolutely. And I have no problem with the argument the Rangers need more toughness. That's fine. Again, it's just I think they could have gotten him for a lot cheaper.
Well, we don't know that.
Same here.
Maybe. I mean, maybe in Stratomatic or fantasy hockey, you'd think, my God, we can get this guy for it. Well, who knows? But we don't. I mean, we were not part of the negotiation. I mean, we're going to sit
You're
here.
Right. We're not part of it. But listen, you can say that, but you have no problem throwing out there that you think other GMs don't value Buchnevich as highly as we do. Well, I mean, it's the same argument.
Well, maybe they don't. I mean, to me, I'm a lot more excited about getting guys that are going to protect our young kids right now, to let them grow and let them develop and have more of a freewheeling opportunity to display their skills than I did at this time, 4 months ago. No doubt about that. I feel a lot better.
Well, let's see. Sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, let's see. If the Rangers go make a deep run into the playoffs, if Lafreniere and Kakko have 70 points this year, and the Rangers are winning games, then this will be completely forgotten as these things are success hides all these things. But if they struggle again and they miss the playoffs, and if they're still losing to the Devils and the Islanders and the Capitals, then you go back and you look at maybe this wasn't the best idea. Maybe we shouldn't have given up a known commodity for something perspective, and it didn't work out. So let's see, because I agree. I think that there is something to be said for leadership and toughness and what that brings to the table and these intangibles, because we're working with human beings. This isn't a Stratomatic game, but just from a pure asset management move, looking at it on paper, it was not the best move. And I think, Drury might have made a mistake here, and we'll see. We don't know, but, I think he definitely gave up more than he should have, and he may have panicked, and it might have been a part of another subsequent move that never came. But in a vacuum, this move, if you just look at it, it just wasn't very good.
What's the impact on the salary cap by trading Buchnevich?
Well, they save a decent amount. He's a $5+ million savings, but they still have $9 million. I think. Listen, they still should have traded Strome 2 years ago because they got a lot coming off. They got a lot of this offseason. They're going to have to pay Zibanejad, Strome, Kravtsov, Kako, and Adam Fox. Plus some smaller guys like Gauthier and Rooney and Sammy Blais, and Georgiev comes off the books. I mean, they got a lot to deal with. So
yeah.
I'll just bring it back to what I said 2 years ago. Should have traded Strome.
Yeah, well,
because they're going to lose them anyways.
Yeah, they might. Although they've had a difficult time finding a center that's as good as Strome. Maybe Morgan Barron or somebody else can step in over time and. That's probably the weak link. Obviously, it's still a weak link. This their center depth in the organization. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that turns out. Who do you guys like better, Niels Lundqvist right now or Jones? It looks like Jones is playing better right now.
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, Niels Lundqvist was voted the best defenseman, in the Swedish Hockey League.
Right.
So,
Lundqvist all the way.
But Jones played well. Jones played well last year with the big club too. Don't forget, he did.
Yeah. It's a good problem to have. I mean, it's a good problem
exactly.
to have. But you have to give Lundqvist all the chances in the world to make the team. He's the best defenseman in one of the best leagues in the world. He's got unbelievable skill. He was a first round pick of the Rangers, so he's got the pedigree. The draft capital is there. He agreed to come over to the U.S. I think the current kind of landscape for these players is that the players and their agent have a little bit more power than they used to.
Well, you're not kidding.
So there's always the chance that he could leave. So from again,
just like Kravtsov, same thing with Kravtsov. Yeah, another Kravtsov situation. But go ahead. You're right.
Well, yeah, or Adam Fox. It works both ways. But from a purely asset management standpoint, you have to give him the benefit of the doubt, and then go from there.
Yeah, Lundqvist
should be on the opening day roster.
Lundqvist is in a lot of Calder projections too, which is rare for. Not rare, but I think it's harder for defensemen. I think the only no matter how good you are as a defenseman, as a rookie, if a forward scores a bunch of goals, you lose, even though you may have been better.
Gotcha.
But
right.
I think listen. That's what I think every Ranger fan needs to go into the season thinking about that, right? Depth at defense with the kids, and salary cap space and picks and at least one pick to spare. So I think they should be a little more. Ranger fans should be optimistic going into this year.
But
you're not winning a cup.
Right, exactly. So as we're getting toward the end of the show here, Rob, the player that you think is most likely to be traded by the Rangers this year, and then Mike. Same question to you.
Wow. Most likely to be traded
during the season.
Strome
or Nemeth?
Okay. Mike?
Yeah. It really depends on how the season goes.
Exactly.
If the Rangers are really struggling, then I could see Mika Zibanejad getting traded. But if the Rangers are really struggling, it's Zibanejad. If it's just a disaster of a season, if it's kind of you're not sure if they're a playoff team or not, I think Strome gets traded. And if the Rangers are playing really well and they're a lock for the playoffs, I don't think really anyone gets traded. I think they're more likely to be buyers. In that case, you might see maybe like some prospects like Jones get traded.
Yeah, I think this is my feeling. I'm with you, Mike, on this one. If the Rangers are just having a tough time or playing miserable, I think Zibanejad. If they're struggling to make the playoffs, if they're up and down, if they're inconsistent, but they're still within reach, I see Kreider being moved, especially if Kreider keeps on the disappearing act that he's done throughout most of his career. I think finally they pulled the trigger with him. If they're this close to making the playoffs. How about
sell?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say on Kreider, I think that his contract's a tough sell.
Yeah.
I think he is good player, but I think most GMs would see his contract as an albatross.
Yeah, I just look at the teams like the Bruins and the Capitals, the teams that maybe feel they could get something out of Kreider where the Rangers couldn't. Maybe they can change the way he plays the game and whatnot, to maybe being a difference maker. But yeah, no, you're right. It's probably going to be a tough sell with that contract.
They should have traded him. They should have traded him before they signed into this contract. That would be
darn right.
The Rangers would be sitting pretty as far as our contract situation goes.
I'm more high on Kreider than I think you guys are, but I agree. I don't understand the term on his contract because, the that many years. I don't think why they thought they needed to give that to him.
They didn't.
I don't understand.
I like Kreider. I like Kreider. I think he's a good, top 6 guy. He's not a superstar.
Not on my team.
He's a solid top 6 guy, and he should be making $4.5 million a year, not $6.5 million for whatever it is, 6 more years
until he's 37 years old.
Yeah, by the time he's slow, and anyway, that's going to be an issue.
We agree that the Rangers I felt they should have blown this team up. They never did with Kreider and Strome. And now they're in the spot where they got to sign a lot of guys again this offseason, some big names. I mean, Adam Fox is going to want a lot of money, and he deserves it.
Yeah.
And Zibanejad, after he got over the COVID stuff, was really good the second half of the season. I think he finished with 8 goals in his last 8 games. If he has a good year too, it's going to be, when you see teams that have won cups, perfect example, teams like the Blackhawks and Kings that have these albatross contracts, you get it. That's the cost of doing business.
Exactly.
You have to give these guys, whether, the Kings are the perfect example. Dean Lombardi talks about it. We had to pay quick Carter, Kopitar, Brown, Doughty. We had to give them these because they won 2 cups.
Mm-hmm.
But it's disappointing that Kreider contract again. And we never know. Maybe this is the Dolan saying we want him to be the face of our franchise. I don't know, but yeah, we agree on something. We don't like the Kreider contract.
Yeah, I think we're on that one. That's for sure. And the final.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna. Well, I was gonna say because you look at some of the other contracts that were handed out. The Cale Makar contract is going to probably be in the ballpark for Adam Fox. So that's $9 million a year. And that Norris nod may get him to 9.5 over 6 or 7 years, and then Zibanejad, that's going to be they're going right for a 60-70 point number 1 center. That's $11 million a year. So I mean the Rangers are going to be in a absolute cap crunch. That's why I said if the Rangers are really losing badly and going off the rails, and I think he'll be traded, because then you really can't commit to that big of a contract if you're if he's not helping your team win. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. Final question, guys. Where do you see the Rangers finishing this year? And then who do you think will win the Stanley Cup? Rob, we'll start with you.
Oh boy. I mean, I guess where do I see the Rangers finishing in the division? I see them finishing 4th. I think they're a playoff team.
Okay. All right.
It's going to be hard for me to say anybody's beating the Colorado Avalanche. Jeez, man, that team is good. I'm a little concerned with that. Giving up Grubauer, I don't know.
How about the Lightning?
No, I think Lightning took a step back a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I still think they're very good. Listen, step back. They're still a great hockey team. I think we all would be lucky if that's the step back the Rangers took. Now they're like Tampa Bay. I just don't listen. They have the potential with that roster, and any moves they make at the deadline to finish, they could finish second in the division and still win the cup easily. Right. Nobody would be surprised with Vasilevsky. I think there's certain. Yeah, that I won't go longer because I'm running low on time. But I see the Rangers in 4th in the Metropolitan.
Okay, so you see them making the playoffs. How about you, Mike?
Same. The Rangers, best case in any realistic scenario, they finish 3rd. But I see them finishing 4th. I gotta say, you're gonna love this, Dad. You're gonna absolutely love it. But I am very frightened that the Islanders will win the Stanley Cup this year.
Bingo. Lou Lamoriello is done.
Number 1 Islander fan.
No, don't give me that. Don't give me that. It drives me absolutely nuts when I see the Islanders on the ice. It makes me sick to my stomach that they do what they do.
Them bringing in, some really quality veteran guys who could still play, like Marie say, and then obviously you forget they're within a goal of advancing.
Yep.
Against Tampa, and they didn't have Anders Lee.
Exactly right. The antithesis of Kreider. Crowder can only dream playing like Islanders. Like this, the team that gets AP coverage here in New York. They don't get articles written about them in the Post. They get AP writers doing the recap of their games. A little small article here in New York. The maestro is doing it again, Lou Lamoriello, and that organization. That's the team that I think is going to win the Stanley Cup this year. Unfortunately, it makes me sick to my stomach to say it because it just brings back friggin' nightmares of the 1980s again. And I think the Rangers will make the playoffs. I do. I think Gerard Gallant will help change the culture. I think they'll be on their way to being a good team. I think they'll make it, but I think the New York Islanders will taste from the Stanley Cup. Jeez, I can't even get. This makes me so angry to even mention the Islanders, but they're going to do it with the goaltending tandem that they've got and the depth that they've got. It's just unbelievable how they do what they do. It really, really is a tribute to that organization. It's a tribute to Lamoriello, the greatest GM in sports. I don't know anyone who can say that there's a better GM in the history of pro sports right now. Show me one. Mention one guy that rivals Lou Lamoriello. Maybe Mike, who's the GM of the Ravens? The former football player.
You're talking. Well, now it's
Ozzie Newsome. Ozzie Newsome.
Now it's Eric DeCosta.
It was Ozzie Newsome, right? Wasn't Ozzie Newsome making that team a perennial, despite injuries and everything else, being a perennial, top 2, top 3 team in that league. Anyway, that's my take. Any final closing thoughts? We'll start with you, Mike, to end the podcast.
Go Rangers.
Okay, Rob.
I'm happy hockey's back. I'm happy, and I'm happy the NHL isn't dealing with what the NBA is dealing with right now. There's only a few knuckleheads left in our league. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good show, guys. It's great to be back. It's great to have you guys back on the show again. And again, folks, we, please let us know your thoughts about guys you want us to cover. We did touch on Rod Gilbert today, but there's a lot of other New York Rangers from the 60s, 70s, and 80s that we could talk about. And again, we do go off the menu. We could talk about different playoff years and teams that you want us to discuss. We would be more than happy to do that. So thanks for tuning in. On behalf of Rob Berger and Mike Browning, this is Tom Browning saying thank you for tuning in to the Forgotten Hockey Players of Broadway. Thank you for listening. This has been a Go Tommy Boy production.